So, this is in response to the Malazan reader tag introduced by the Counsellor of Moon. So, after a lot of demands, I'm gonna ask that. You probably know me from forums like the Reddit Malazan forum, Dust of Memes, different channels on Discord, and in general the comment section of many Malazan booktubers over here. I'm Niflrog, by the way, so these are the questions and obviously my answers. How did you find about Malazan? Well, after finding Game of Thrones, I decided I wanted to read the books, A Song of Ice and Fire. I eventually realized that the next book wasn't coming anytime soon, so I started finding fantasy series that dealt with this battle between good and evil in a more subtle way. So I stumbled upon a duology by Jacqueline Carey named The Sundering. It's Godslayer and Banebreaker. And after finishing that duology, I decided to keep reading fantasy. I define myself as mostly a sci-fi reader. So I started looking for stuff in fantasy to, let's say, give fantasy a chance. The only thing I had read up to that point was Tolkien and A Song of Ice and Fire. So I decided to see if I could find something in fantasy that dealt with this battle between good and evil in a more subtle way, in a more grayscale instead of black and white alone. So the other prerequisite that I had was that the series had to be massive and finished. That was it. So I found Malazan somewhere on the internet. I'm not sure. I think it was in a list of the biggest fantasy series up there that were finished up to that point. So it had a massive word count, and it had the comment that it actually dealt with gray morality. And I decided that, well, I knew it was there, but it took some time until I decided to actually read it and give it a shot. So, describe your experience the first time, only time in my case. It was interesting because at first you have all this information you don't know. You create this hypothesis in your mind of what could happen in the future, or since you are presented the world but you are not given defined rules, you start to extrapolate and make guesses on how the world works. So that's really nice. On the other hand, it was also a bit complicated because it took me a long time to fully trust the writer, the author. I had my doubts about where he was going with all of this. I thought it wouldn't be as interesting as I wanted it to be. I thought it was going in a different direction. But in the end, about book 5 or 6, I decided that no, this guy knows what he's doing, and after that point it was amazing. So that was mostly my experience, my first time experience. When did you realize the series was going to be an alt favorite? In a sense, it was after the last couple lines in Memories of Ice. It made me realize that this jumping between one continent and another, and all these random characters, a massive amount of characters, that it was all interconnected. And it did have a message. So, for one, at that point, and the next point was when I read my favorite book in the series, Tall the Hounds. So, that was it. My favorite aspect of the series. I think it is the way in which it speaks to our reality based on this fictional world. You have this massive endeavor of creativity of these two archaeologists and writers who create this war, and then you put that into novel form. But these novels, even though they are fiction, they still speak to us. There is beneath this plot and these characters, there's still a discussion and an exploration of reality, of war, and of human beings in general. And I think that realizing that what's going on in the pages is actually a commentary on our society, or in human beings, on individuals, that's my favorite part. Nothing is truly perfect. Share a little gripe you have with Malazan. I think food doesn't have enough weight, enough importance in the series. That's something I really enjoyed of A Song of Ice and Fire. Food as a socio-cultural element. And I think Erickson did not explore that a lot. I've seen in interviews that he doesn't enjoy cooking. So I get that. That's a minor gripe I have. I would have loved to see much more than just ale, hard cheese, and salt soup in the series. So that's it. So, what are your favorite and least favorite installments? Favorite, Tell the Hounds, no question, by a lot. I mean, Malazan in general is my favorite fantasy series, but Tell the Hounds is one step above that. I put Tell the Hounds with classics of literature, like one of my all-time favorite, 100 Years of Solitude. Tell the Hounds in particular is one step above the rest for me. My least favorite, which is in fact my least enjoyed book, because I still think it's amazing, it's Reaper's Gale. So, how many times have you read the series? I've read the series once. So far, of course. Besides Malazan, what are other series in the Malazan world? Well, I will reframe this. Besides the Book of the Fallen, what else have I read? I've read the 2 books that are out from the Carcanas trilogy, and 2 of the 6 novels of the Malazan Empire by E.N.C. Esselmont. Night of Nights and Return of the Crimson Guard. So, what other reading interests beyond Malazan? I read mostly sci-fi, when it comes to fiction, of course. I read recently Book of the New Sun, that is technically considered to be fantasy too. Also, one might argue that it's fantasy, science fiction fantasy, I don't know. It's a mix of both. Other than that, I read non-fiction a lot. General literature too, as I mentioned before. And of course, I read a lot of technical papers on the discipline I'm studying. I'm studying mechanics, so I read a lot about theoretical mechanics, applied mathematics, and all that. What advice do you give to first-time readers? That's interesting. Number 1, read actively. If you're not familiar with the term, look it up. Active reading is the key to getting a good experience in Malazan. Number 2, do not bring to the series the preconceived notions that you have from fantasy. Have an open mind to see things from a different lens. Don't expect Malazan to be what Lord of the Rings or Wheel of Time or things like that are. It's not. It's very different in terms of structure, on the approach, on how characters are written, on the way information is distributed around the books. It's very different. So have an open mind. Don't expect Malazan to be something it is not. Besides that, be aware that you don't have to understand every little detail. I mean, try to, but don't focus too much on that. The author has a certain level of redundancy, and that's precisely because if you miss some of the foreshadowing, he'll have somebody a couple books later down the line explaining that a bit more explicitly. And basically, that's it.